Jewish women were likely at the center of Eugene Delacroix's Orientalist fantasy. In 1832, Delacroix went to Morocco on a diplomatic mission. He was a guest for 6 months in a Jewish household. He wrote in his journal, quote, "The Jewish women are admirable. I fear that it will be difficult to do anything other than to paint them. They are pearls of Eden." End quote. Europe categorized Oriental or Eastern peoples as inferior. The identity of the Jewish women was magnified by these measures of inferiority. This perspective, seen in the painting, together with sexual tension of gazing into a forbidden space, contrasted between dominated and supplanted cultures, may have signified the identity of the Jews of France. Delacroix also sketched other beautiful Jewesses in the Jewish quarter called the Mela, and within the markets and streets. In Morocco, Delacroix did not have an opportunity to gain access to women in a Muslim harem. It was nearly impossible. One attempt to sketch an unaccompanied Muslim woman bathing in the river resulted in being chased by armed men. Harem women were often victims who had been kidnapped by foreign invaders and sold as harem slaves. They may have belonged to diverse ethnic, national, and religious cultures. Near the end of Delacroix's North African journey, he stayed in Algiers for 3 days. While he was there, he may have seized the opportunity to sketch women in a harem. There is evidence to suggest it was a Jewish home. They may have been Jews who converted to Islam. In North Africa, Jews were subject to anti-Semitic discrimination, political and social humiliation. Delacroix completed Women of Algiers in his Parisian artist studio. Jewish women dominated the model trade for a decade starting in the 1830s when the artist completed this work. Jewish young women were the ideal artist model, but by the end of the decade they were considered to be morally flawed and seen as the femme fatale. But by the end of the century, she was seen as essentially flawed. She was ultimately perceived to be the destroyer of the artist and shunned as the archetypical fleur de mal. Stereotypical devices provided an alluring environment for fulfilling the fantasy of the French imagination. One critic from the Salon of 1844 wrote, quote, "She resembled a courtesan more than the chaste heroine of French captivity." End quote. The beauty of the Jewess imprisoned her neurotic carnality that fused negatively into France's consciousness. It was plausible that the Algerian women who modeled for the sketch and the Parisian studio models Delacroix used to complete the painting had a Jewish identity. Delacroix was surrounded by Jewish models while he stayed in North Africa. Further, Jewish women dominated the artist modeling profession in the 1830s in Paris. It is entirely conceivable that the women in Delacroix's Women of Algiers were Jewish. We may agree that Jewish women were likely at the center of Delacroix's Orientalist fantasy.